Hello. Today we'll talk about Gordon Matta-Clark, and an artist who studied architecture, actually, and I think he's relevant to architecture, very much so. So Gordon Matta-Clark, born Gordon Roberto Matta, was an American artist best known for his site-specific artworks he made in the 1970s. As you can see, he was born in 1943 and he died in 1978. So he died at 35. He died young. His father was a famous painter and he became famous himself. Matta-Clark's parents were artists. Anne Clark, an American artist, and Roberto Matta, a very famous painter, a Chilean surrealist painter of Basque, French, and Spanish descent. He was the godson of Marcel Duchamp's wife, Tini. Interesting. His twin brother, Sebastian, also an artist, committed suicide in 1976. So, family with problems, but they try to transcend those problems through art. Gordon Matta-Clark, he studied architecture at Cornell University from 1962 to 1968. So for 6 years, he studied architecture, including a year at the Sorbonne in Paris, where he studied French literature. In 1971, he changed his name to Gordon Matta-Clark, adopting his mother's last name, like Miss van der Rohe. The Rohe is actually the name of Miss van der Rohe's mother. He did not, and Picasso also, he changed his name from his mother. He did not practice as a conventional architect, Gordon Matta-Clark. He worked on what he referred to as Anarchitecture. Yeah, not bad. Maybe we should be all architects, at least for a while. At the time of Matta-Clark's tenure there, Cornell's architecture program, so the school where he studied in the United States, was guided in part by Colin Rowe, a preeminent architectural theorist of modernity. So again, Gordon Matta-Clark studied for 6 years architecture. And some drawings by him. Even here we see the demon of conjunctio oppositorum manifesting itself in this sketch, which is obviously architectural. So this architect, which could translate as a not an architect or against an architect, this artist who appeared to be against architecture actually in my opinion, stimulates and emulates architecture. These are just some graphic works, drawings that he did. You could say they have no relationship to architecture, yet he worked with buildings, but he worked with buildings by making incisions, making cuts into the building, and yet it's a very personal form of deconstruction. Actually, it's not actually deconstruction. We are going to see samples of his work. He was an exceptional artist, and in a certain way also an exceptional architect. That is an architect. There you see he had, because at Cornell probably they also flirted with a certain interest in the columns, the so-called classical columns. Now you see the typical student work of architecture, but we also see his ideas were already coagulating in the sense of transforming existing structures dramatically through his interventions. Like here, with cuts into the facade of the building and so on. Again, this was a man who, in a certain way, fought with authority, fought with the totalitarianism of architecture, because architecture is connected with authority, with power, with money, with the government or whatever. And this artist, found his personal way of still being connected to architecture, but sabotaging architecture in its expectations, deconstructing reality. Gordon Matta-Clark. I mean, he arrived at visualizations, if we are to call them so, totally new, not on paper, but actually cutting into the flesh of the buildings, but not in a disorganized way. Actually, he brought order, but a different kind of order into the buildings by his interventions. These are collages of, he also practiced photography, but you are going to understand better a little bit later what he did. Like, for example, here, you know, he made these cuts into the slab and into the walls, and created through these excavations, through these erosions, but controlled erosions, you know, through geometry. These are erosions, excavations into the building that promoted the different architecture and the different. He actually transformed. In fact, he rescued the building from death. It's a new life. It's a new lease on life, so to speak, with the work of Gordon Matta-Clark. Is it interesting what we look at? I think it is. Would I live in such an apartment? Assuming the risks, I think I would, because it challenges my maybe predictable desire to be comforted by the paraphernalia of protection, by the illusion that, you know, I am in my little house, in my little apartment, and that everything is fine, even if I know that outside of the building there is the war in Ukraine, but I'm still cozily sitting on my sofa and eating popcorn, and everything is fine, when in fact is not. So Gordon Matta-Clark is opening up dramatically the building towards the street with huge openings. Maybe some echoes from Louis Kahn, maybe to an extent. But here you see the ruin attempting to become willed. And it's actually a paradox here, because he seems to ruin the building when in fact he's actually giving a new life to the building. Here is the young man, you know, with his own hands contributing to you know, whatever he was doing. You see here these circles, these cuts into the building, into the floor, into the walls. They appear to sabotage the building, but I think in essence he's trying to bring the building closer to a more accurate, more adequate expression of a truer relationship between the inside and the outside. Is the will of the architect to and the artist to engage reality from you know, a creative, non-conventional, idiosyncratic position, and that's what he did. You know, briser le toit de ta maison, said Mircea Eliade. Well, that's exactly what he did here, but he did it not without the formal will of the artist, but with the formal will of the artist. So these buildings, which were probably destined for demolition, received from the work of Gordon Matta-Clark a new life, even if a temporary life, new life. He worked like a sculptor, but he didn't work on a block of stone, but on a building, at the scale of a building. He cut from that building just as a sculptor usually cuts in stone or wood. Look what he did to this building. He sliced it in the middle. He created that rift. Now that rift, you could say it's anti-architecture. Well, he called himself an architecture or an architect. That cut, that rift, that seizure into the building, I think, tells the truth of life much better if it wasn't there than if it was not there. The cut, that disruption of the the security, so to speak, of the building is the one that actually amplifies the life. Although, the conventional mind would say he ruined the building. I don't think so. No, it's a paradox. I agree. It is a paradox that through that cut, he actually amplified the life of the building. He didn't diminish it. Here you see those two doors. Here is a play with other artists did it too. You know, where you when you close one door, you can open the other one. You cannot open both of them at the same time. Gordon Matta-Clark. This artist, I think, deserves some reflection and to look what he did to this building. You know, he deconstructed it, but in a very different way than the so-called official deconstructivists. You know, obviously this was not an inexpensive enterprise to dislocate that fragment, but a circular fragment of an otherwise Cartesian facade, and then have it, you know, pendulate precariously, and you know, the mobility of it amplifies the drama. Because I think architecture, at its best, achieves the paradoxical marriage between the stable and the unstable, between what is stability and what is instability. Maybe not so explicitly and so dramatically as he did, but I think if architecture assumes a certain level of instability, is all for the better. And look, from a banal building that was probably destined for demolition, he created this thing. Yes, an expensive enterprise, but artistically, I think very valid. The question is how to make a building which expresses some form of unarchitecture without necessarily using his strategy. Imagine this was a school, and imagine the students, the pupils, would go to a school which looked like this. Well, I think they would say it's a school, it's an institution, I'm supposed to behave, but this disruption in the facade and the anatomy of the building is also encouraging me to look through the window at the beautiful birds that fly not far away from the building. That is, it's an encouragement towards freedom. And here he is, the rebellious here, so you know, exercise himself in the art of filmmaking and photography. He was a lover of creativity, non-conventional as it is, but great creativity is always non-conventional. It has to be non-conventional. Well, he managed, I don't know, through his relations, through his success, through maybe even his father, because he, as I said, he was a famous painter, his father, to, you know, have people pay for these experiments. I am sure they were expensive, but drawing, an interesting drawing actually by Gordon Matta-Clark, the house that was slit, you know, the rift in the house, the circular cuts into the slab. Look here, Louis Kahn on the left, and on the right, Gordon Matta-Clark. You could say on the left, the architect par excellence, and on the right, the unarchitect by excellence. Cedric Price, the radical pedagogue in architecture, himself an architect, Cedric Price also advocating unarchitecture. But the unarchitect is, you know, is actually the anarchist. The architect is an anarchist who loves, you know, provocations. But it's an interesting strategy, and maybe you can try it too, you students in architecture. You make a building as your professors want it, and then you begin to excavate and erode it and cut. And through those cuts, maybe you express some of your frustrations, some of your anger, some of your whatever, but you express something. Someone said that to think means to be able to say no, have the courage to say no. But you see, in the case of Gordon Matta-Clark, this no is still done with an artistic will. It's not done, indifferently. It's not even done in an aleatory way. Actually, it's an expression of a different kind of order that he want, a circular order, if you want. You see, he's trying to oppose to the Cartesian system, the circular system, if I am to call it so, even it might not be yet a system, and maybe it's a good thing that is not a system. And look, a ruined building destined to this is near Centre Beaubourg, Georges Pompidou in Paris. I guess this existed before the building by Renzo Piano and Sir Richard Rogers and Peter Rice, the brilliant engineer about whom I will talk tomorrow, who had genius as a structural engineer, accomplished their building. I didn't know there was a building there, but I guess that's what this picture shows us. There was an existing building with which Gordon Matta-Clark did what we look at here. Now, this is hazard, this pile of pieces of wood. And here he is filming from the top of it. This is another, or one of the works I showed before, with the cuts, again, with the play of what is convex and what is concave, these erosions, these cuts into an existing building, and he changed the building. That's what he did. He recreated it. He was the second architect, if I can say so, of that building. What if you make a project from the beginning, thinking of this double process? You work, let's say, in a Cartesian mode, and then you sabotage the Cartesian mode by introducing these disruptive erosions, as we see them here, or excavations. This is a work seems too tamed, and it is too tamed. I don't know if it was done by him directly or with an intermediary, an architect, and he did some sketches. I'm less impressed by this, actually. Tamed, to be a rebellious spirit and to become tamed is actually, in my opinion, a defeat. Now, we don't have to have his coiffure in this picture, all of us, but it's clear that this young man wanted to stand out and wanted to rebel. Now, maybe this rift, this cut, is an expression of an arrested life, or a reminder of what we are all moving towards, and that is the end of life, maybe. But the will of the artist is present. So he tells us, I am aware of what will come, and I will express my awareness. And here he is, working on expressing his awareness. Gordon Matta-Clark as a filmmaker or a photographer. It's also a reaction to functionalism. Yes, dear architects and dear students in architecture, it is an exasperation with and an obsession with functionalism. Because perhaps Friedrich Nietzsche was right. Live dangerously. So let's talk a little bit about him, if you don't mind.